Okay, this video is for kids with autism. Somebody recently asked me, what do I recommend for a kid with autism? And I really haven't thought about this too much, but also, kids with attention deficit. And I would say for all kids, you want to practice good brain health habits. Okay, so what are these? First of all, avoid excitotoxins. I've written about that extensively in my book, Food, Mood, and IQ. I've also made videos about that. You begin with always low-fat vegan diet, whole food, 100% organic, gives you better blood flow to the brain. I like what Dr. Day said. She said the same treatment should be used for all diseases. And what she means by that is optimize your health in every way you possibly can, and then you'll get the best possible result you can get. Because what heals you from a disease is your immune system. So if you optimize your health, your immune system will function optimally, and you'll have your best chance to get better. In general, that is true, about 95% of the way. There are certain special situations where you'll vary that, but in general, that is true. Like if you have a big open wound, in that setting, you'll need to eat a little more protein to heal the wound, but normally you will not. Okay, high-fat diets also have an excitotoxic effect, meaning an overstimulation of your brain cells, because what happens is the high fat causes increased insulin resistance, and then the insulin resistance leads to elevated insulin in the blood. The pancreas makes more insulin. Then you need more insulin-degrading enzyme to remove it. The insulin-degrading enzyme is made in relatively limited quantities, fixed quantities, such that and it has higher affinity for the insulin than it does for beta-amyloid protein. Beta-amyloid protein will accumulate in the periphery of the body. That means outside the brain, outside the central nervous system. It'll then recross the blood-brain barrier, go into the brain, and have an excitotoxic effect. Because remember, it can increase permeability of the NMDA receptor. It's a calcium channel, the glutamate receptor on the postsynaptic neuron. So you don't want that. That's another benefit to eating a low-fat diet. Okay, let's see what else. Low-fat diets, then you avoid all the blood sludge, the rouleau formation, sticking together of the red blood cells, so you get more oxygen delivered to the tissues. They can function better. Avoid caffeine. It's like psychological stress, the equivalent of elevating cortisol and catecholamines. So it's a vasoconstrictor to the brain, lowers blood supply to the brain. You don't want that, but it increases stimulation of the brain, so it has an excitotoxic effect. So that's double bad. Decreased blood flow with increased metabolic rate, that increases the risk brain cells are going to die and become dysfunctional at least. Avoid sleep deprivation does the same thing as psychological stress, elevated cortisol and catecholamines. That weakens your immune system, overstimulates the brain, okay, and it leads to decreased blood flow to the brain, a bad combination. Avoid excessive psychological stress. Don't stress the kid out for no reason. Avoid other excitotoxins, things like aspartame, a common sweetener in processed foods and soda pops. Eat organic only, so you avoid glyphosate. That's what they spray on soy and 70 other foods. It's an excitotoxin, activates the NMDA receptor because that's a coincident receptor. It also binds glycine. Glyphosate's thought to bind the NMDA receptor and increase its activation, its permeability, how much calcium it allows into the cell, which increases the activation of the cell, the metabolic rate of the cell. So you don't want that. So just eat organic and you completely avoid it. It's also a mitochondrial inhibitor, so that's double bad. You're simultaneously increasing the metabolic rate of the cell while diminishing the ability of the cell to make energy, to make ATP. So it's a double screw job for the neuron. Not good. Okay? To eat organic, you also avoid atrazine. That's what they spray most characteristically on corn, and that's a mitochondrial inhibitor. Again, there's like an indirect excitotoxic effect when you decrease the ability of the brain cell to make ATP, then that means you're decreasing its ability to pump calcium out of the cytoplasm. Thus, the excitotoxic effect of whatever calcium's in the cytoplasm is prolonged, so it's an indirect excitotoxic effect. Excitotoxic effects are bad for brain cells. You don't want that. Okay, avoid processed foods because they tend to be loaded with MSG, MFG, and equivalents. MFG is manufactured free glutamate. All that matters is glutamate. MSG is just monosodium glutamate. So you're just getting more and more of that in there because it tastes good. It makes a stale, crappy food taste good. Okay, it's a flavorant, but it's also an excitotoxin. And these other things, there's all kinds of bad stuff in processed food. I recommend zero processed food. The most highly processed food I would ever eat is single ingredient oatmeal or quinoa. That's it. The fungal inhibitors typically succinate dehydrogenase inhibitors, so they inhibit intermitochondrial membrane electron transport. They thus inhibit ATP production. You can actually push the cells into this anaerobic metabolism. You don't want to do that. Food dyes, artificial flavors, they're neurotoxic. Emulsifiers are associated with increased risk of leaky gut. Mercury is often associated with high fructose corn syrup. We talked about a lot of processed foods, toothpaste being contaminated by lead, arsenic, fluoride, cadmium. You don't want that. Let's say if mama tastes a whole bunch of things, but it's best just to avoid all the processed food. That's how you can do it with higher accuracy. Avoid mitochondria inhibitors. I made a list of over 100 of them. You can find them all in my book on Prevent and Reverse AFib. I discuss this at length in my other book, Food, Mood, and IQ. And you can just watch my videos. Just go to my videos on AFib. Just recently, I've been talking about this long list of mitochondria inhibitors. I'm almost done with it. There's over 100 of them that I found. You want to avoid that because the brain uses tons of energy. Of all the things in your body, your brain uses more energy than anything else. Your brain and the heart are the two most metabolically active things. And your eyeballs. Your eyeballs are kind of part of your brain. Okay, so if you want the kid's brain to function as well as it possibly is going to, you want to, give it good blood flow, avoid mitochondrial inhibitors, avoid SERCA inhibitors. Basically, anything that's chemical and smells bad tends to be a SERCA inhibitor. Don't smoke cigarettes in the house. Don't burn candles. Don't do anything that smells bad. Anything that smells bad is bad for the brain. Don't burn incense, none of this stuff. Avoid sweets and soda pop, and again, processed food, because these things have a tendency, in like white bread, these refined flours, they'll tend to rot the teeth. And then when the kid gets cavities, you go to the dentist, and the dentist will put some toxic metal in the brain, like amalgams with 50% mercury. It's toxic to the brain. You don't want that. Okay, so it's best to just teach the child how to protect their teeth. Teach them to floss at night, have them brush. You don't even need toothpaste. I don't use toothpaste, but just brush because you get the biofilms off there. The bacteria can only cause a cavity when they stick to your teeth. They cause cavities from sweets because they convert the sweets into acid, and that can burn holes in the teeth. Intrinsic acids can also burn holes in the teeth. Things like soda pop. Okay, watch out for orange juice too, because it's both super sweet and it's highly acidic. Soda pop's the worst though. It's not only super sweet and acidic, it also sticks to the teeth. So then the bacteria can stick to that, and their metabolism will produce acids that can burn holes in the teeth. Avoid holding a cell phone to your head. Use a speakerphone. Does the kid really need a cell phone? Cell phones are pretty overrated. Better to hardwire the house than use Wi-Fi if that's an option. Filter your tap water, ideally with a whole house carbon filter, kitchen reverse osmosis filter, shower fluoride filters if you're where you live is fluoridated water. Better to put the kid in a homeschool situation if that's possible. Next best, is a Catholic school. If that's not an option, maybe a private school. If that's not an option, public schools are the worst. So be very cautious about putting your kid in a public school. They're not your friend. Anyways, these are just some suggestions I could think of here off the top of my head. I would also say check out Catherine Reed. Catherine Reed wrote that book, I think it was called Fat, Sick, and Stressed. She's a PhD biochemist specializing in protein metabolism, and she had a child with autism. And once she got all the MSG, MFG, monosodium glutamate, manufacturer-free glutamate out of the kid's diet, all the processed foods, her daughter got better. Her daughter was cured. I've seen the before and after videos. So I recommend you watch her videos. You might want to read her book. The way to avoid all that MSG, MFG stuff is just avoid all the processed food and avoid powdered foods. Anyways, I hope you found that helpful.